Alright, so the bell housing is back in. Starter is back in. Now it's time for me to work on the fuel tank. So what I'm doing is I'm converting to a return style fuel system for several reasons. Most of which to make it easier to tune for the tuner. And for peace of mind that I'm not dropping fuel pressure, that I can set it where I want it. So to get to the tank, you got to pull out the splash guard because the connector is right there. To disconnect the fuel tank. And I'm also running a Tronics hot wire kit. It's supposed to be here in a few days. Brake ducting. Now the splash guard should come out. Yep, there we go. Oh man. Because you've got to undo this connector right here. Alright, there we go. I'm actually going to pull that off because the Tronics kit replaces that. Alright, now gotta use this guy to pop loose the fuel line, which of course will make a mess. So on an LS, pretty much anything LS, you've got this in-tank fuel pressure regulator, and apparently there are regulators on both sides. There's a regulator right here, which is what it looks like to me. That little silver thing right there is a regulator. Yeah, it even says regulator on it. So there, in order to keep the in-tank regulators from bleeding off fuel pressure, you have to use these block offs. So this is what I'm using. It's a Lingenfelter Performance fuel pressure regulator bypass. Supposedly it fits an 03 up to a 13, excluding ZR1. And there's a passenger and a driver side. One's blue, one's red. So this one is the passenger side, and it looks like it's still going to bleed off pressure in some way, I guess, to power this jet pump. It looks like some kind of siphon system, because this one, let me get it open, this one actually has holes in it. It's got a hole all the way around it where it looks like some of the pressure bleeds off. There we go. I bet there's some kind of O-ring or something in there. No. Aww. Well, there's two O-rings. That's life, people. One of them went in the tank. There's another little thingy in there. I've heard stories of people not getting these things in there properly and having to do this again. But I don't know how you could do it wrong. Yeah, that was the difference. I put a little lithium grease on those O-rings and it popped down in there a little bit further. Yep, that's what it was. A little lube goes a long way. Alright, that's everything I needed to do to the passenger side, so at this point, just gotta put it back together. That would make sense because it's got a right angle on it. Alright, now, fuel level sensor. This is the driver's side fuel sending unit, and there is the fuel pressure regulator on this side. And then I've also got to tap into it. I've got to drill a hole, which I think is going to be right there for the return line. That looks like pretty much the only place that has enough room for a thing. So now I just gotta. Oh, this is a bulkhead fitting, a JIC bulkhead fitting, and got this barbed line. This is going to go inside the fuel return. Goes on there. That way, in the future, whenever I need to take this loose, I can. This goes on the inside. It'll pinch it. You know, the fuel hat goes right there, and then this will pinch it. And I'll put a gasket right here. But for now, go ahead and do the regulator. Basically going to do exactly like I did on the other one. Except it's a little bit more difficult to get to. See if I can do this without taking the whole freaking thing apart. Or breaking anything. There we go. Not too bad. Now the trick will be, can I get it out of there? Remember, it's got those O-rings. Don't want to lose those. It looks like the O-rings stayed in there this time. Yep, both of the O-rings stayed in there this time. Whew, this thing stinks. Alright. Now I need the blue one. This one is the driver's side. Those O-rings out of there. One O-ring. Two O-rings. Make sure I put some lithium spray on the things. That helped them just pop in on the other side. Joker down in there. The other one kind of popped. This one just kind of slid in. But the other one, I couldn't get the little plastic ring on it because it wasn't seated all the way. It looks like it's seated all the way. Now I gotta drill a giant hole, 0.55 inches. Or 14 millimeter. I have a step bit. Yeah, and it goes to 9/16. What I'll try to do is drill it sideways so all the debris falls down on the ground and not down inside. Key is I have to be far enough away from the side that this guy will still fit. So as long as I'm in that ring, I should be okay. So here's the gaskets. And then here's the washer. I had a washer on hand. I drilled it out to where it just barely fits. And then I had to flat spot it because of how close it is to the side here to get that thing over it. Now I just got to put it all together. So there we go. Got my fits over there just perfect. Now I got to work on making up the return line. Well, I guess I got to put the tank back together first, but so I got the fuel pressure regulator in there, or fuel pressure regulator block off anyway. Now goes back in the tank. So the workbench is filling up with parts, and as cool as that is, sometimes it just means lots more work to go around. And one of them is this Race Tronics hot wire kit. So this is the intermediate harness part number. This goes from inside the wheel well to the top of the fuel sending unit. And then I got this fuel pump wiring harness. So it's their hot wire kit, I think is what they call it. And I have to say, I am just flat out impressed with the quality of this kit. It is freaking amazing. They've got wire loom, they've got shrink tubing, they've got really high quality weather packs. These look just like the OEM ones. So basically, you've got, and this relay right here is probably $30 if you were to go to a parts store and buy it. It also came with a set of zip ties, some silicone grease, the screw to mount the relay, and an extra fuse. So super high quality. But this basically goes directly from the alternator. You bolt it to the alternator, bolts to the back of the alternator, and then this you just screw into the frame right next to the fuel pump, and then this side plugs into the fuel pump because it's got the 10 gauge wires, and then this side plugs into the factory harness. And what they did was they bridged these two wires right here, and this is the fuel level sensor. So this goes to the fuel pump, the top of the fuel hat. Your fuel level sensor goes through here to the wire harness, and then basically it uses the 12 volt signal that would originally power your fuel pump to activate the relay. So super easy install, I imagine, but that's what I'm going to work on tonight, is getting the driver side fuel tank back in the car. My buddy needs his engine lift back. So I'm going to try to get the driver's side fuel tank back in the car. I've got a plumb. This is the harness that goes from the hat to the firewall. And then I've got to plumb the fuel line, the return fuel line. And that's pretty much it. Then it goes back up in there. So I've already got the hose. And I'm using the same exact hose that I used in my truck It's this, where's that? Parker, yeah, this stuff right here. Parker 801-6. It's been running in my truck for over a year at 50 PSI. I've run E85 through it. I've run high test through it. And it's still flexible, still malleable. It runs from the tank all the way inside the engine compartment, and it's been running in the engine compartment. This will be my second summer now, running it in the engine compartment. And it's worked flawlessly. No leaks, no frays, no nothing. So it's definitely gonna work for a return line. I'm just gonna use the factory fuel line, factory hard line for the power supply, the main fuel supply, just because I've read all over the internet that this line can support 800 horsepower, and that's way more than my goal. Even running E85 at 600 horsepower, that should be able to support everything I need. I'll probably run out of injectors before I run out of anything else, so we'll see how that goes. But now it's time to get started working. So real quick, here's a comparison of the wiring, factory wiring. So that's the factory wiring. This is the Tronics fuel kit. You see how much thicker the wire is? I don't think it's quite double, but I think the wire from the factory is 16 gauge, and this is 10 gauge wire. So definitely gonna be more than enough for this fuel pump. Here's how I decided to do the fuel line that goes to the tank, where it goes on top of the tank. I've got a barbed JIC fitting and this Parker push lock hose, and I'm going to use this spring clamp because with this Parker push lock, you're not supposed to need a clamp. It's definitely not going to be under any pressure. That wasn't quite that bad. So without it being really under any pressure, I shouldn't need a clamp, but just for peace of mind, I'm going to use one of these little spring clamps. And I guarantee you, the sucker will never come loose. So that's going on top of the fuel tank. Got me one of these little kits from AutoZone. It's like $7 or $8. It's got a whole bunch of clamps in it. I actually like these spring clamps. So now, this is just an extra fitting. These things are, I had to go so far to get them to a place that's, 30-minute drive one way. I decided to buy two just in case I broke one. And then it'll be nice to have one around. So it screws to the top of the tank. Do a quick tour of what I've got accomplished so far. I've been working for most of the day and I haven't been videoing because it's really just futzing, run something, doesn't fit, run it a different way, it doesn't fit, okay, that's the way I'm gonna do it, so I didn't video much of that. But here's the Tronics fuel harness installed. This is the one that goes to the top of the fuel hat, the big heavy one. Got everything installed, so you have to be careful because this side of the relay with the gray and black needs to go to the factory harness coming from the car, because this has the 12-volt signal that activates the relay. The relay then supplies power to this through this big long wire that goes to the alternator. So that's all hooked up. I've got everything kind of bolted down. Comes around up here and then it's zip tied all along. I need to get a light. Hopefully it's a little bit better, but I have the fuel harness zip tied all the way down through the tunnel. This is my return fuel line, which I put a little bit of loom wrap on there to keep it from chafing, and it's zip tied all the way down through there. I got the crossover tube and got the tanks, both of the tanks back in. I got the fuel pressure regulator installed and tested. It holds 60 psi right now. Let me show you that part. I gotta drop the car down for that. This is how I decided to do my fuel pressure regulator. I installed it right here. It's loose right now because I was testing it, and I can't tighten the return line with it bolted down, but it bolts right there, and it's just a flat L bracket that bolts to the inner fender. And I've got big giant washers on this side also to clamp it in place, and I used stainless steel bolts, nuts, washers, and nylon lock nuts to make sure it stays in place. That's going to vibrate, and I don't want the nuts to vibrate loose. So here's my supply line. It supplies to here, and then it comes out the other side and goes to the fuel rail. So it comes out on this side over here. But I have this side blocked off, which you can't really see. But I have that blocked off because I didn't want to pressurize this and fill my cylinders with gas. And then the return line is down there, and it goes back behind the brake lines, back behind the steering shaft, and then I put heat shielding on it right there. And then I'm going to tee off of that vacuum line right there for my boost reference. And then what I did to test it was I took a paper clip and shorted across the fuel pump relay right here. If I put this in here, you'll be able to hear it. And you see it jumps up to 60 psi and holds it. So it's just dumping fuel into the tank through the return while it's sitting there running. So made a lot of progress getting those wires for the, oh, I forgot to show you, the this is where the harness connects to the alternator, and then it has the fusible link, which I put right there, and also screwed it down to the fender. So it was just a whole lot of running something, no, I don't like the way it works, run it again, okay, that works a little bit better, go to the next one. So I had to run the fuel hose, had to futz with the regulator, figure out how I was going to mount that, all kinds of stuff. So that's good now. I'm sure the fuel pressure will change once I get the car to run, because it won't just be bleeding off at the regulator, but I don't know, that might be equivalent, we'll see. So now this bad boy has got to go back in. I got to give the hoist this afternoon back to my buddy. He needs it because he bought a car lift, and he needs his hoist to move his car lift around. So torque tube is going to go on the tranny, get mounted back on the jack stand over there, and then it's going to go in. So that's what I'm going to be working on next.